All right, everyone's famous now. Okay, let's get this going. We had a couple of things on the agenda item. I just wanted to, I put my agenda item on there, and it's just a real quick update. We have the Cassandra Kubernetes connector SIG meeting on Thursday. There's been quite a bit of work done on the CEP draft document that's sitting in Google. Many thanks to Mick for helping me out with a lot of stuff around CEP. I think that's going to be, I'm going to try to do some cleanup on the doc. There's some other folks that want to do that. But essentially, I think what we're going to do is try to get this thing grounded out on Thursday. Like, okay, are we at a place? And can we start talking about moving forward here? And then like what does moving forward mean? I think from what we've talked about is, since there are so many operators out there already, that this needs to be kind of more of a like a Kubernetes Cassandra mini community discussion about how that even is going to look before we start putting all this energy right into the Cassandra project. I think that'll be a lot of noise. I think that is the right move. Just after talking to a lot of folks about this, it's like, well, kind of sort out what this actually is, and then that will be the proposal. And there's not only a specification, but some idea of what the code would look like as well. That's where we're at right now. But any discussion around that?
Yeah, one of the questions that I'd had is if we'd had a chance to talk with some people who have been successful running Cassandra on Kubernetes to figure out what some of the harsher lessons they might have learned have been. It's important to be able to adapt our current sidecar model that many people are using to Kube. But I'm also curious what rough spots people have found along the way.
No, it's good, Scott. Actually, that's what's been encouraging, is that's pretty much what's been in these SIG meetings. Is we've had a mostly significant amount of people that are running organizations that are running Cassandra and Kubernetes now. We've only had a couple of orgs. Like, what's interesting is Bloomberg and New Relic both showed up and they're interested in doing it. So it was really, there was some interesting interactions between the people who are running a Kubernetes operator in their own way, asking, well, what do you want? If you're interested in this, what would you like? And so there was kind of the reverse of that. But yes, absolutely. And that's what I hope we're trying to capture in the doc.
Nice, that's great to hear.
Yeah.
So I have a question, the thought process, which is slightly basic here. So a lot of CEP2 goals that we are talking about have alignments on from CEP1 as well. There's a lot of overlap there. So did we put a thought process of contributing those towards CEP1 so that non-Kubernetes deployments can utilize as well?
That's been discussed a lot. I don't even know. You're right, because it does look like they are linked up in some way. They're connected, of course.
Yeah. So like one thing I particularly see, which is like CEP1 and CEP2 talks about, is about running bulk commands and running a desired state commands like no-to commands, which can really benefit non-Kubernetes operators as well. And that one of the goals for keeping that in CEP1 was there's a lot of asks for it. For example, desired way to run a no-to command. So I would like to run no-to cleanup command on my entire fleet of Cassandra clusters. Putting that desired state and Kubernetes operator taking care of it and running it on all the process in the same way in non-Kubernetes environment. That's something that's really useful as well. So I was wondering if we can contribute all of that to CEP1 and benefit both communities.
Anybody want to comment on that? And I'm thinking about one person I might call. All right, made me do it. Jake, I know I know this is probably right up your alley. You have your foot in both projects.
Yeah, I mean, well, so the only thing so in our sidecar thing, I didn't want to get into the realm of like of having to manage like off a across the nodes. So for the operator to execute the action on each node is not that big of a deal, but I get the point of it would be nice to have that kind of action built in. I just worry about how do you secure it well, so that you don't like accidentally do the wrong thing, because if the option is basically call this one URL for just one node, and a different one for all nodes, or like just one rack, then it could easily get screwed up, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed about security in CEP1. Sidecar is well within, I mean, it's always subject to well within the security boundaries, having been on the instance along with the Cassandra process, and also having auth and auth Z story laid out. So if, I mean, you would be authenticated and authorized against calling sidecar process and sidecar commands as well.
Vinay, maybe it would be helpful. I'm not really sure, but where is CEP1 right now? Just in the process.
Yes, I mean it's in the process. It's in the development, I would say, in progress.
Okay. Okay, so just to keep the conversation moving along, CEP1, CEP2 sounds like, I mean, from what I can tell, and this is, I'm just trying to reflect and see if this is what I'm hearing right, is that CEP2 will rely on CEP1, but CEP1 is somewhat independent from CEP2. Is that correct? Jake's going like this. You don't want to say that, Vinay? Don't make my CEPs dependent, man.
I mean, I heard independent and different, so I'm really looking forward to a way where we can help both the communities, right? So, and also not duplicate the efforts and do it in different ways from the operator point of view, where it's a Kubernetes operator or native Cassandra operator.
Would it be helpful if I put up maybe just a one-time meeting to talk specifically about CEP1, just because we haven't done that, like just like this kind of a meeting, but we can have a more high bandwidth communication talk around that in a community stand like this?
I think, I mean, in my view, I'm thinking of whatever those efforts happening in CEP2, can those happen on CEP1 and help CEP and achieve the same goal is what I'm looking at.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, sorry, just to be clear, I was nodding to the idea that CEP2 should use the sidecar from CEP1. It shouldn't build its own thing, because that would defeat the purpose of CEP1.
Yeah, so that's the dependency I was talking about, is CEP2 depends on CEP1 heavily.
Yeah, plus one to what Jake was mentioning, that not duplicating the efforts.
Well, if you can make it to the Kubernetes SIG on Thursday, we could put this up as a discussion item. if not, you and we could talk about like trying to get together yet another discussion. But I do see that as a real, that could be dangerous. It's like we're starting to diverge.
One thing I wonder about, and this actually came up from a phrase you used, Scott, recently, which is the whole "let 1,000 flowers bloom" approach, like on the testing side, is like if we have 7 different Kubernetes operators out there, and each of them have a different, distinct point of view on what to optimize for an operator, totally makes sense. I would wonder if with a sidecar, we're in that same boat, like whether there's one clear set of correct compromises for a sidecar that we should have a sidecar, or whether or not it makes sense to have an ecosystem of sidecars. I'm not putting down a flag in either camp, but as with anything like this, it's going to take significant effort for us to figure out the right compromise if we find a way to blend a bunch of different points of view together to have a single artifact versus just letting a lot of them kind of coexist and having our compromise occur on an API, for instance. I don't know if that's helpful or not. I'm just throwing that out there. Are you talking, Sam Kalp? Because Zoom is highlighting you, but I'm not hearing anything.
I was, but then I yeah, I was, but then I stopped. I think like I agree in a way that you can have multiple sidecars outside, but I think like that duplicates a lot of effort, and that's why like having an official sidecar is not stopping other people from having their own sidecar as well. And as a project, I think it might make sense to have our sidecar, and that's the reason I think we want to do that.
Makes sense to me.
But we should not make changes in the sidecar, and also at this point, the sidecar is optional, right? Is what we have always said, right? If that's going to change, then we need to basically have a vote on that, right? Or an agreement on that. So anyone can have it. Like we are not going to make changes in the sidecar, which no one else can do it, right? So. That's one of the reasons. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I think Chris
by no
wrote a few points here on the chat. I don't know whether Chris, you want to say that, or I will just read those points for you. Chris Lofink wrote a sidecar reference implementation that the optimizations can be made on. Not every company can dedicate huge teams to build sidecars. But anyway, going over to you, Vinay.
Yeah, so I by no means I'm saying no to building too many sidecars, as long as there is one reference implementation that people can benefit from, but not putting community in a spot where, well, I have a sidecar which does XYZ and another sidecar which does ABC good. Like, should I have both? Like, what is right way to do that? Right? So that's where I think +1 to what Sankalp's and Chris' point on having that reference implementation is good for the community, and anyone can build their own sidecars if they wish, as they wish.
Yeah, for what it's worth, Vinay, I'm personally very sympathetic to that point of view. What that, at least to me, kind of arises is this question of how we as a project community navigate kind of these discussions about the different points of view on what the right thing to do is that turn into a reference implementation. Because I think about what the last pickle guys went through when they were working on, I think it was Reaper, and how they ended up with like the sidecar and like, let's just have our own sidecar, because getting all this into the other one, like we kind of have a history of having a lot of strongly held points of view, but not really knowing how to blend those together to figure out like what's the right set of compromises for all of us to move forward. Which we're not going to like hammer out on this call, but I do think it's worth us kind of thinking about some more collectively.
Yeah, that's what basically the CIP comes in, right? Because right now there is a lot of burden on someone who wants to make a change versus people who don't want to make a change, right? And we all have been burned by it at different times. And I believe that the CIP is going to take us there, right? And also getting to that agreement will also be an uphill battle, right? I think that's the way I think we should be approaching is through the CIP, because there are a lot of issues which have happened in the past, especially with automation, because there are more people who are involved in automation. If you're talking about a very specific storage engine change, you will only have 5 people who will comment on it. But if you're talking about sidecar, you'll have 100 people comment on it, because it's just more people understand that area more than one very specific area in a code base. You know, like if you start a thread on Paxos, you will get 3 replies. If you start a thread on running repair, you will get 100 opinions, right? Which is good, right? It's not, I'm not saying it's bad, but what we need to do is basically have that process so that things move forward. And as a project, we should actually make sure that the progress is being made. Then actually people, you know, and you know, we need people to help make the process go forward.
Thanks, Josh, for bringing up the Reaper example. It helped formalize what I was trying to think here. If there's going to be a reference implementation to the sidecar, I think it really helps a lot with having different applications of it out there, whether it's a Kubernetes operator or whether it's Reaper. And one of the things that we teased out in that conversation was the notion of what a sidecar was quite different between the Reaper people and the sidecar CEP. And that as that conversation continued, we realized that the Reaper sidecar would benefit a lot from the sidecar that's been built. And if that reference implementation is targeting those more foundational gaps, everyone's going to win, and it's going to bring value to other sidecar implementations as well, maybe, likely.
All right. Well, I mean, is there any other comments on this particular thread? I mean, this is kind of like we're some gray area. There's some really cool energy here, and I see what's happening with the Kubernetes operator. There's a lot of energy, and it's like, where do we funnel it? You know, it's like that. It could go 8 different directions, or 1 different direction, or 2 different directions, but it's not always apparent. And I think this is what we're trying to get narrowed down with the CEP, with the sidecar, and with CEP2. I know there's hanging questions there, so I think it'd be good to, in order to move forward, to get those cleared up. All right, moving down the agenda, Mick, you wanted to talk about CICD. You have the floor.
Cool. I didn't actually want to talk about it, but you guys wrote me in. I think it was you, Patrick, and someone else said, you got to go talk about it. There's been a few messages to the dev list on the work that I've done with the Apache Jenkins. And because everybody loves Jenkins so much, I've been kind of left alone in the forest to deal with that one. So I've got some questions to everybody, but also hoping that people reach out and have some questions about that. Looking at who's here, I don't think I need to run through or give an introduction to what we have now with the CI Cassandra and the machines which have been donated by DataStax and Amazon and Instacluster and Island. And I do know that everyone is using predominantly Circle CI on a day-to-day basis. But one of the ideas and motivations behind getting the Cassandra CI, the Apache Jenkins, up and running again was to have a permanent record of test results for our main branches, and to encourage a more repeatable, transparent, permanently recorded process to identify bugs and fixing them in the community. If you look back through some of our older tickets, it can be a bit difficult to know, look at regressions and that type of stuff. So if people have input on that side of things and what they want to see, that'd be great. I was also hoping that we'd see some people from Instacluster or Amazon turn up to ask them what they would like to see, given that they're donating these machines. And one of the values to having this set up is it makes it possible for people to do CI without having the expensive Circle CI accounts, which only the big companies can give them.
I think there's some additional value there too, largely due to a change that Circle CI had made recently. The inability to view a build that you yourself hadn't triggered in your own personal org has made it really difficult to share Circle CI results, which I think gives us even more reason to place greater emphasis on ASF CI.
So Scott, didn't that get fixed recently with the new UI?
Oh, did that? I might have missed it.
Yeah, I think
So-
more interface you can share.
I've been talking to them about it for actually a back and forth, and I've had a back and forth with many of their support people. The new UI wants to change it so that everyone has to be authenticated. So we might be able to get everything visible, but they want everyone to do a login first. So that is the one thing I'm trying to push them to change, is to make it so we don't need logins. But they're trying to push back, saying everyone should create a login first so they can track you.
So I have a question around the usage of Jenkins CI. So like other developers, I've been using Circle CI for before I submit patches. Now, is there a recommendation that we should also be using Jenkins CI to validate the health of the patches and not just the regular branches?
I think this is free for everyone to jump in and give their opinion. My view on this is I've been doing it whenever I review something, because just for the sake of double accounting, I'm always comparing the Circle CI and the Jenkins results. There are a different set of tests. There are things that Circle CI do and things that Jenkins does. Yeah, but I mean, with Jenkins, you have to be a bit patient.
Hey, Mick, I was also under the impression that a person had to be a committer in order to trigger jobs on Jenkins. Is that still the case?
That is the case.
That's a little bit of an impediment for just the common contributor who would like to see the test run without looping in a committer at that time.
Yeah, and like for that crowd of people who are not committers and not working in one of the big companies that are providing the premium Circle CI, they're left out in the cold. And I think the only way we can look after those people is when a reviewer comes along on that patch who is a committer, one way or another, they can help them out. Otherwise, those people just have to use the free Circle CI, which is just unit tests. I can't see any way around that.
So I've reached out to Infra about this, and I keep on forgetting to poke them. So what I've noticed, at least from Hadoop's background, is that you don't need to be a committer to run CI, and a lot of CI happens even pre-commit rather than even post-commit. And then Hadoop QA comes back and annotates the Jira itself. So when I've asked them what is unique about Hadoop that is not true with Cassandra, they came back and said they will look into it, but I never heard back. So I kind of feel like I need to go push them again on that. Because it seems like as I look around the Apache ecosystem, most projects have an ability for non-committers to have pre-commit builds. And it seems like it's a weird thing where we're not able to.
Is it because of the runtime? I mean, is it just because it eats resources like crazy or anything in that regard?
No, that's the reason you don't have Circle CI on the Apache account, because the Apache account just would get blasted with 400 projects or something. For the Jenkins stuff, it's because it's their infrastructure and they can't have unauthenticated, unauthorized people just randomly running stuff. And like, there are plenty of jobs out there which are running scripts, bash scripts. Like on the agent which can build and deploy your website, then you've got this. That's a secured machine in their infrastructure. And I've heard, David, that other projects are doing it as well. I think Beam was doing it Beam seems to be leading the way in a lot of these things. But I'm wondering if what they've done is they've whitelisted forks of the repository. So if a contributor comes along and then the committers can go, they're trusted, we'll pre-commit their branches. And that gets around that we can't just let anything unknown, untrusted run on our hardware.
So I don't know about Beam. I know Spark, it doesn't use ASF infrastructure for its builds, so they can do whatever they feel like. But I know it, like Hadoop itself, how I understand it when I was talking to a couple of friends over there, is that they have a bot polling Jira or listen to Jira. And whenever Jira sees an attachment, it then tries to trigger the build. So it looked like it's at least Jira annotated. And what I was hearing was that the primary issue was that, like, with GitHub itself, anyone can come in and do whatever they feel like. But with Jira, you've already authenticated with Apache itself. So it seemed like that was like a better area. So even if that can get worked out, whereas like it's annoying, but you can submit a patch via Jira and then CI can work there. That would at least be a great compromise for everyone who doesn't end up having it. But again, I've not really gotten a good confirmation from Infra on exactly why not.
So Hadoop uses Apache JDKs. I put a link in the chat. It has a whole system for what it will execute and what it doesn't. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that uses JDKs. It was built specifically for Hadoop to do this. So.
Cool, thanks.
The question I have too, Mick, is actually I have three questions, but I'll combine two. There was some talk about eventually adding Harry and Fallout to the CI process. What would it take to get those going, or is that just really kind of off in the future?
There's Fallout, there's Harry, there's the driver tests. The upgrade tests are not in Jenkins yet either. It's a good question, and if I link it back to the previous question, is there like the value of pre-commit building on Jenkins? Is that something that we want to push for anyway? Because no matter what, it's always limited to how much it can test. While Circle CI, it's in comparison unlimited. And maybe Jenkins actually, it has more value if we focus just on the post-commit side and adding these longer running stuff that we can't realistically run in Circle CI. I don't know what others think about that.
Do we know where we're at on capacity or utilization for the Jenkins boxes?
On busy days, there seems to be maybe 1 day a week where lots of commits come in, especially if there's like 3 or 4 commits in half a day over 4 branches. That gets pretty close to saturating those nodes. But there's a lot to parallelize the tests there. So one of the discussions I had there with Patrick was whether we could split those nodes up. You can run Jenkins over Kubernetes.
That was my other question.
Spoiled it for you. Sorry, Patrick.
That's all right. Take it.
And that would solve a couple of things for us. And Scott, that may help smoothen out some of that saturation. Like at the moment, our CQL/SH lib tests, they're not containerized. So they depend on the Python on the shell. And a few of those agents are running Ubuntu 16 and this doesn't work. And if they run in parallel, because there's 2 agents per node, they bomb. So there's a couple of small rough edges there that I've just hacked and solved the easy way for now.
I think David has some relevant experience muxing Jenkins builds over Kubernetes.
I saw him smiling.
Yeah. So Nick, you and I have talked before, like one of the things that I would love to see for Jenkins, and my personal stance is I would love for Circle CI to die in favor of Jenkins. So what I would love
I
to
am
see,
recording, David, by the way, so.
everywhere I go, I always say the same thing, long live Jenkins. Right, so for me, one of the things that I'd love to start seeing is like, what is the nice thing about Circle CI? And one of the nice things that I have access to, it's we can partition the work of all the different tests across all the different workers itself, which drastically lowers the execution time. So in Circle CI with a higher config, you get Dtest running about 30 minutes without the higher resource test, I think, if I remember correctly, and unit tests are about 4 minutes. What I would love to see in Jenkins is if we can get similar results to get most of those things running faster. One thing that I see itself at the same time is that, like, since the work is also skewed, you're going to have a small number of containers that take longer than others. So even when you have multiple different builds going at the same time to conflict, they end up balancing each other out. So that, I think, would be the greatest way to like get people to start using it a lot more often, is with Circle CI, like you're done within an hour. So I think that is the biggest hindrance right now.
I'm allowed to talk about what Robert has been working on.
Oh.
I think he's already mentioned it. Yes, no, Josh?
He's going to throw the Gradle grenade. Go for it, buddy.
Oh, run.
Yeah, so Robert's been testing using Gradle Enterprise and distributed testing, and he's got the Dtest running in 54 minutes because that's the longest Dtest. So I have no idea how feasible that is on various fronts, but kind of makes me want to wait and see what comes out of that before containerizing more of those tests. One of the things I really would like to see is all of our CI scripts made as agnostic as possible, so that the Circle CI configuration and the Jenkins configuration, it's as thin as possible.
Well, on that vein, Mick, some folks I've been talking to in the Kubernetes community have asked, like, you know, we've been talking about CICD as a topic around Kubernetes and Cassandra, and there was a really good idea that I don't know how feasible it is, but providing a Helm chart to the community that would build, basically, here's your complete setup for, you know, this a CI/CD setup for building Cassandra and testing it, and then using that to help grow the amount of resources potentially. You know, so if big company X says, yeah, we would love to provide this infrastructure. Here's your Helm chart, and then we, you know, everything's containerized. It's portable. You know, it kind of goes into this portability sphere. Again, this is a Kubernetes operator topic as well, but it's also containers. We really haven't grounded out on the container discussion.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to do there, Patrick.
I like being aspirational.
Yeah, but I think certainly if so, in Confluence, I started a wiki page to try and kind of put down the pros and cons of Jenkins and Circle CI, and hopefully we can move it in that direction, Patrick, once we kind of start kind of creating something which is more base or a general vision, regardless of the one particular CI system. And ideally be able to just pick it up and run it anywhere.
All right. Anything else on this topic?
And Mick, you mentioned that there are some tests that run in Circle CI that don't run in Jenkins and vice versa. Should we, I guess, make an effort to try and get them so that they can both run the same sort of tests everywhere. Is that correct?
Yes. So it's in not the latest, but the second latest CI status email on the dev list. Circle CI doesn't do the CQLSH lib tests. That's correct, David. And there's some hesitation about adding that because some people want to remove those tests altogether because there's duplicate test coverage in Dtest. Is that correct?
So how I remember that with Dinesh was commenting on is the effort to run it in Circle CI might be more effort than porting it over to a Python Dtest. So I think his argument was, why not just bite the bullet and go Python Dtest? But then that ended up having it so neither of those tracks happened. So running whatever the test is, however it is, would still be good. And making sure that Circle CI and Jenkins are at least doing the same thing would be great.
Yeah, it's not ported to PyTest yet. It's still nose test.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just think that's a first step before we can even think about moving to one platform or the other.
Yeah. So the other things, Anthony, was in Jenkins, there are no upgrade Dtests yet. There are no JDK 11 builds, and there are no JDK 11 tests on 8 builds. Someone is working on the JDK 11 build and test. That's in Jenkins. That's really easy because there's a matrix plugin, and all of the JDKs are there already. And with Alex's recent benchmarking on JDK 14, that raises a question of whether we want to look into providing support or start testing in our CI JDK 14.
In principle, no objection to testing with later JDKs. I think that we're probably stretched a little thin to consider it something that's supported, but it's decently likely that doing so could give us a heads up on something we might need to fix in the future, or something that we might need to report to the OpenJDK project.
Yeah, how I kind of see it, it's after 8 and 11 are good and we're all satisfied with what that means for us, then 14 is a great nice to have. If they break, that might not be our fault, or that's something for the future to deal with. So it's great to monitor. But from a resource perspective, I want to make sure that 8 and 11 are exactly where we need before we add something else that could potentially cause even more resource issues. But yeah, running on 14, 15, and all the others as they're coming out is a great thing to have.
So I can't add JDK 14 in before we get a beta out? Break a whole pile of tests and send Josh and Adam screaming off into the forest?
I am
excited. When you put it like that.
I'm excited about ZGC that I'm willing to eat a little pain, not that I'd be the one eating the pain, because God forbid I have time to work on code these days. But yeah, I mean, do we have a precedent for like some of these tests running at like a less frequent cadence, like weekly tests, et cetera?
No, so when I jumped in and did the CloudBees setup and the pipeline, the declarative pipeline that's in Tree, the idea there was just to create one pipeline,
okay,
and not try and have all this. I think that kind of comes back to, it overlaps to what Patrick was saying, trying to make it just as simple and as context-free as possible.
Yeah, I mean, there's simple and context-free, and there's this question of, do we try to prevent every single possible defect from hitting a branch, or do we have some tests that are so laborious that we balance it and remediate when problems happen? Because like Harry and Fallout stuff is beefy, right? Like those things take some time to run. So saying we're going to run those for every single commit before they merge, like at some point it becomes a ecological bad choice for the planet, much less for the project. So like maybe there's the question of, do we run some things nightly? Do we run some things weekly, where we still need to make sure that stuff is clean, but that we do not expect that the volume of defects that arise from that will be sufficient to need to do that before merging. I don't know.
Absolutely. I have seen in Jenkins some of the longer tests, they can get one stage actually reused in different pipelines. It seems to, when it queues up a test, I think there's some things you can do there. I'd like to look more into that, both combining how often you poll your repository, but also if you have longer running tests and they're queued, for example, their concurrency is limited, then they'll piggyback.
Yeah, JDK 14 is, I mean, thinking about that, because like if we ran that weekly, I'm sure Monday, like it would, you know, tickle Robert Stoop to wake up to that report, because for whatever reason, that's the kind of thing that seems to make him happy. Either that or he's compelled to do it, either way. But that would at least give us like a non-invasive way to kind of start turning the crank on some of the, you know, future-facing things without them being part of the day-to-day operations on the project, kind of separate those concerns.
Yeah, it sounds like a bridge to cross when we get to it. The same, I don't know how long the driver smoke tests run. I don't think they're as long, but I'm sure there's probably a bigger matrix there to test.
Yeah, Adam, aren't those smoke tests like 72 hours or something?
No. I mean, depends which smoke tests we're talking about. So in the order of a half hour to a couple hours, depending on which. And then, as you mentioned,
Soak
the different...
tests, not smoke tests. Phonetically similar.
What tests?
The soak tests.
Oh, yeah, those run for days.
Yeah, sorry, my bad. Kind of
we
different.
call them duration tests on our team, but sorry, I misunderstood what you were saying.
No, I said 72-hour smoke test is missing the definition.
Wrong. Like you didn't hear the wrong thing. I said the wrong thing. But yeah, like those multi-day tests in the drivers, for instance, we could get value out of running these things more frequently than just right before release. But obviously, it wouldn't make any sense to run those things like even on a daily cadence.
Beyond knowing when they broke. Bisecting.
Quick question about testing. There have been lots of different efforts to do the correctness testing, and sometimes that requires specifically longer running tests. Are there plans to do that at a project level, or is that more from a company to company contribution level of testing for the correctness testing in particular? Because sometimes you have to run it for days because you have to establish, you know, certain patterns that may or may not be present in a single day test or even a week test.
Well, theoretically, like the entire value prop of Fallout is to be able to do that kind of generative fuzz testing, where you write those generators, have them run, have them soak, and then start pounding weird states onto the cluster and see what happens when nodes go down, come up, bootstrap, etc. And I'm pretty sure there's people right now working on writing some of those, because we had to gut CTool. That's like the internal Cassandra tool that was bad, and make it Kubernetes native before open sourcing Fallout. So I think that's something that's open source, but that mostly contributors employed by DataStax are pushing right now. Yeah, it's just kind of a fragmented tapestry right now, Jeremy. Right, like different companies have different resources they're applying in different ways.
Right. Well, yeah, and it is more complicated to test. I didn't know I know Fallout tested specific failure conditions, but I didn't know if it did the in-depth like correctness testing that had been done in other places as well.
Yes, any generator should come with a validator that confirms that the data that comes out the other side is the data you expect. It's not purpose built for the same kind of thing like Cassandra Diff, where you stand up two different clusters and make sure that the data that's in there is the same. It's more of you have a single cluster and you do bad things to it and make sure at the end of the bad things, it's the way you expect it to be.
Right.
So both test important things.
Yeah, that's the subtle difference. One is more like lots of different failure conditions that are very specific, and then the other is more specific. I just didn't know if either of those, like the Cassandra diff methodology or the fallout methodology, was in the cards for putting it into a regular cadence as we get closer to the release.
Yeah, for what it's worth, like on my personal to-do list, number one is read some paper about Paxos and Raft and whether or not the world was concluded, which one they like more. But number two is to kind of try to enumerate, like, what does the ecosystem of testing look like on the open source project, and what needs those different tests serve, and trying to kind of get that together in a single pane of glass, get it on the wiki so we can kind of figure out as a project, like what we have, what we want to invest into, what we think we don't have coverage for, just to kind of try to get it all like out of the tribal trenches and into a central place we can all collaborate on, if that makes sense.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. And I don't mean to say that, you know, before the project gets the 4.0 out the door or whatever, it has to be a project level thing. I just didn't know if there was a formal plan for, you know, for each significant milestone, having something done from disparate company resources perspective.
So one thing that I think would actually be pretty nice is a lot of the testing that we want to do, and a lot of testing that everyone is kind of working on, I don't see, without additional resources getting added into the ASF Jenkins environment, I don't see those running on Jenkins for a long time. We would need to beef those up in order to actually run them there, which would still be nice. But what would be kind of nice to also see is at different milestones is the different companies that are working on different things contribute. We ran the test against this release. So if we want to say alpha is done, let's say that Dtest ran, Fallout ran, and here's the test report, here's what we're finding. If we want to say beta is done, doing the same thing. So the different companies that are working on it could at least contribute the test results. That would, I think, be a very beneficial thing, given the fact that we don't think that as a project, open source being able to run them is not going to be easy.
Yeah, and I think that's what more I was asking. Thank you, David. I think that'd be really nice to have that as far as like the plan.
To that point, I think one of the things that we're learning is that we're able to produce the highest rate of new issues for investigation and resolution when we're putting DBs through their paces rather than just in a simple load testing environment, but finding ways to, without potential for customer or user impact, model simulated workloads either through capture and replay, through diff testing, that type of stuff as pre-flight. That's telling us a whole lot more than independently running one of these tools against a static build is.
All right. Anything else around this? I mean, who knew CICD would be so cool, right? We all did, you know. It's like I want my code built for free, all the issues taken care of. The next thing is AI that fixes it once it finds the problem. Like, you found it, you fix it. Yeah, David's like, yeah, right. Then we can all go live on a beach.
Patrick, I'm sorry for being a bit quiet on some of the CI/CD and build system conversations. I hope one day to ascend the hierarchy of needs to be able to care very deeply about these.
I don't even know how to take that statement, Scott. That sounds like a plea for help.
It is, actually, yes.
Okay, all right. So everyone, group hug for Scott. Group hug, there we go. As much as we can help. Okay, is there anything else we have here? We're kind of at the top of the hour. I don't know how much more we can bang on. Anything else? Yeah? All right. Well, in the spirit, for all the Apple employees will love this, I got one more thing. Cassandra shirts? Since you got to the end of this particular meeting, I got a whole batch of these things. They just got delivered today. So they're just Apache Cassandra shirts. Yeah, Korean, that's fun. The artist I have, his name is Johnny. He is awesome comic book artist in Brazil. I love giving him money to do cool things, and I just give him some basic ideas. He came up with this one, which is really cool. If you would like one, send me an email with your mailing address and your size. And we have women's sizes and we have men's sizes. and just send me an email, patrick@datastacks. So I'm expecting I'm gonna get a flood of emails at this point, but hey, that's what it's all about. And I'd be happy to send you one or two if you need to. But yeah, this is kind of like, this is really hard because we're not able to do meetups and things like that. So, like, why are we getting t-shirts? People still got to wear clothes at home sometimes, right? At least we're on Zoom meetings. So I'd be happy to do that for anybody. And if anyone watches this video after the fact, the offer still stands. You don't have to be here for that. That's for anybody.
Patrick, that's awesome. Thanks. I think I've got like maybe a 7-year gap in my history of t-shirts where I'm missing Cassandra apparel. So anything that I've got is maybe from like the past year and then maybe 8 years old after that. So this is a really important refresh. Thank you.
Yeah, this is, well, it's got the ring. Got the ring. The ring was important. The eye, important. And then there's this person right in the middle here. This is you, Scott. Rising up above your little problems and getting into CICD.
Nice.
You do feel it? Are you inspired?
I'm pumped.
All right. Great.
I thought that was a brave Cassandra operator.
Yeah, well, using Kubernetes. Right, Vinay. On that note. All right. Well, thanks everyone for another lively and interesting meeting. I'll post the video soon and I'll have the notes up. Thanks to Adam for typing up all these notes. Adam, you get another t-shirt. That's all I got. No more t-shirts for me. All right. Thanks everyone.
Great. Thanks also to Patrick for organizing again. Great to see all of you.
Yep. Thanks everybody.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Patrick.
Bye-bye.